A Maya temple in Calakmul juts above the rainforest canopy, a silent witness to a lost civilization. Thick vines coil around its stone stairways, and the once grand plazas lie under a dappled green light. Over 1,000 years ago, these now abandoned cities were vibrant hubs of an extraordinary civilization, the classic Maya. Their scholars charted the stars, and their kings raised towering pyramids, all amid what is now dense jungle. But by the end of the 9th century, something changed. In city after city, the inscribed histories abruptly stop. Scribes ceased carving the deeds of kings, masons left temples half-built, their tools perhaps dropped mid-task. One by one, great Maya urban centers like Tikal and Palenque fell silent, deserted around the year 900. The collapse spread across the Maya heartland over decades, like a chain of dominoes toppling. As the last rulers' dates came and went without successors, the rainforest began to claw its way back over plazas and palace walls. And entire civilization's monumental cities were left to the elements. Why did the Maya abandon their magnificent city so suddenly? It remains one of archaeology's greatest enigmas, a mystery with the atmosphere of an ancient ghost story. Except it really happened. Archaeologists, like detectives sifting a cold case crime scene, have spent decades searching for clues in the rubble and roots. They have unearthed hints of drought in deep lake mud, signs of warfare in hastily built fortifications, and even the bones of a massacred royal court. Each discovery is a piece of the puzzle, but the full story of the Maya collapse is as intricate as their hieroglyphs. Was it hunger and thirst that drove the people away? War and chaos? A crisis of faith? Or all of these combined? In the spirit of investigation, we step into the verdant ruins and the distant past, following the trail of evidence left by a fallen civilization. The jungle-shrouded stones hold answers and more questions about why one of the ancient world's most brilliant cultures mysteriously let their cities die. In the search for answers, one suspect looms large: nature itself. Scientists have uncovered compelling evidence that the Maya heartland was struck by a devastating drought at the peak of its prosperity. Deep beneath the limestone hills and ancient reservoirs, the very geology records a time of desperation. Paleoclimatologists studying stalagmites and lake sediments in the Yucatan have found that around the 9th century, rainfall declined sharply, a mega-drought unlike any seen in centuries. Minerals in the sediment of Lake Chichen Canab, for instance, show that water levels plummeted during this era. A stalagmite from a Belize cave tells the same tale: years upon years of significant desiccation, dated precisely to the period when Maya cities withered. In essence, the skies over the Maya turned barren. Rivers and reservoirs dried to cracked clay, crops withered under a relentless sun. Starvation and thirst would have stalked the land. Yet the Maya were resilient. They had weathered droughts before and rebuilt. Why was this drought different? The difference was in the society it struck. By the late 8th century, Maya civilization was a victim of its own success. Population had exploded. Cities like Tikal swelled to perhaps 50,000 souls. To feed so many, the Maya had transformed their environment on a huge scale. They cleared vast tracts of forest for maize fields and even drained and farmed the swampy lowland wetlands. In boom times, these measures produced abundant food. But there was a hidden cost. The deforestation was so extensive that it disrupted the ecosystem's balance. Trees that once trapped moisture and renewed the soil were gone. When the rains failed, the denuded land could not retain what little water fell. The very act of expanding their civilization had made it more fragile. By cutting down forests and expanding farms, the Maya inadvertently amplified the drought's effects. Fields that had fed multitudes now turned to dust. In the span of a generation, hunger and desperation would have set in, undermining the foundation of society. Environmental catastrophe alone, however, was only one part of the calamity. While drought struck from above, internal strife and violence were tearing the Maya world apart from within. The classic Maya realm was not a unified empire, but a patchwork of rival city-states, each ruled by its own dynasty. As resources dwindled and pressures mounted, competition likely intensified. Archaeological evidence indeed points to a surge in warfare during the final years of the great cities. Inscriptions and carvings from the late 700s and early 800s increasingly depict warriors and captives instead of peaceful rituals. Stelae show kings standing over bound prisoners, their once allied neighbors now conquered enemies. This was a time when long-standing alliances frayed and petty disputes flared into battles. The scars of these conflicts have been found in the ruins. Hastily erected palisades and defensive walls around cities like Aguateca suggest that people felt threats looming. Some sites show clear evidence of violent ends. The city of Canquen, for example, met a grisly fate around 800 AD. Its royal palace was invaded, and the king and royal family were brutally massacred. Their bodies, still adorned with jade jewelry, dumped into a cistern alongside dozens of nobles. The decapitation of a city's leadership in such a manner would have been a death blow to its social order. War disrupted trade routes as well, cutting off the lifelines of food, obsidian, and other goods that bound the region together. As battles raged on roads and rivers, merchants could no longer move goods to market. Cities starved economically as well as literally. And what of the Maya kings and priests during these cascading crises? They'd always been the linchpins of Maya society, intermediaries between the people and the gods, keepers of time and ritual. They led ceremonies to ensure rains would come and the sun would rise. But as droughts persisted and wars encroached, those rituals may have begun to ring hollow. Imagine the anxiety of common farmers and nobles alike. Year after year the crops fail, enemies press in, and the sacred fires and prayers yield no relief. The divine kings, once regarded as ordained by the gods, now could not deliver on their promises of prosperity and protection. This erosion of faith in leadership is another piece of the puzzle. Some scholars believe that the collapse was exacerbated by a breakdown in the social contract and the religious order. When people lost confidence in their rulers and their gods, the unity of the city-state could unravel from within. There may have been unrest or even rebellion, peasants refusing to toil for a king who could not summon rain, regional nobles turning against central authority. The inscriptions fall silent on the specifics, but the sudden abandonment of temples and palaces hints at a societal implosion as much as a natural disaster. One theory posits that the complexity of Maya civilization had grown too great to manage, and traditional systems of authority simply collapsed under stress. A civilization can survive famine or invasion, but if its soul, its organizing principles, loses meaning, people may walk away in search of a new way to live. Finally, there are other, quieter culprits in this tale as well. Some researchers have wondered if disease played a role. In the densely populated cities, malnutrition and contaminated water would have made people vulnerable to epidemics. A prolonged drought could have forced people to drink unsafe water or migrate through disease-ridden areas. While direct evidence is sparse, studies show that in tropical environments, once rare pathogens can spread rapidly when human activity disturbs the balance. An outbreak of some illness, perhaps a waterborne parasite or a viral hemorrhagic fever, might have swept through weakened communities, delivering an invisible final blow. In truth, no single factor can solely account for the scope of the Maya collapse. It was a perfect storm of intertwined catastrophes. Environmental collapse fed social turmoil, in turn, magnified the suffering caused by environmental collapse. By around 900 AD, the great cities in the southern Maya lowlands were largely empty shells. The survivors did not all die off. Many likely migrated to smaller villages or to the rising new cities in the north, but they left behind the glittering ceremonial centers that had so long defined their world. In a human span of years, the Maya went from erecting stelae and pyramids to simply walking away from their cities, leaving the jungle to inherit what remained. The story of the Maya collapse is a saga with many threads, and even now scholars continue to weave new insights into the tapestry. Over 80 different theories have been proposed to explain why the Maya abandoned their cities. Yet the prevailing view today is that it was not one cause, but a convergence of calamities. Prolonged drought, environmental exhaustion, warfare, political disintegration. Together, these created an insurmountable crisis. The fall of the Maya reminds us that even advanced, sophisticated societies are deeply vulnerable to changes in climate and to their own internal weaknesses. There is a haunting quality to this realization, one that has inspired not just scientific investigation, but also analogies to the great cautionary tales in human cultural memory. The collapse of Maya cities has been likened to the legendary fall of cities in religious texts, tales where divine wrath or moral decay leads to ruin. Indeed, in the Bible, the destruction of once mighty places is often explained as the result of the inhabitants' sins or hubris. When King Solomon's temple fell, the Hebrew scriptures imagined onlookers passing by the ruins and asking, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this house?" The answer given, because the people forsook the Lord and embraced other gods. In the Quran, likewise, there is a poignant verse that asks whether people have not seen how many nations before them were destroyed, leaving behind empty dwellings as a sign, a warning, for those who would reflect. These ancient warnings suggest that pride, idolatry, and excess carry the seeds of collapse. The Maya were not part of the Abrahamic tradition, yet the fate of their cities evokes a similar archetype. A flourishing people who perhaps overreached or lost their harmony with the world and who paid a steep price. To adherents of faith, it might seem as if the Maya collapse was a form of divine punishment for some collective transgression, a notion that adds an air of spiritual mystery to the archaeological facts. Even within Maya culture itself, there may have been a sense of cosmic reckoning. The Maya believed deeply in cycles of time and divine will. As droughts intensified and the social order crumbled, they may have seen it as the turning of an age or a judgment from their gods. Perhaps priests performed ever more elaborate ceremonies on temple tops, desperately beseeching Chak, the rain god, to send mercy from the skies. Evidence suggests that towards the end, some Maya centers increased their ritual deposits and sacrifices, as if trying to appease unseen powers when all else failed. Imagine the last days of a city like Tikal or Kapan. The reservoirs are nearly dry, the people are hungry, the king, once treated as a god on earth, leads a final procession through the great plaza, praying for rain amid thunderclouds that never break. The eerie cessation of inscriptions after that point feels almost like a moment when the Maya, in despair, chose to avert their eyes from recording their history, as if acknowledging that their gods and leaders had somehow broken the covenant and nothing could save the kingdom. In truth, the Maya did not vanish in a puff of smoke, nor were they wiped off the face of the earth overnight. Their descendants are still very much alive in Central America, living in ways both changed and continuous with their ancestors. After the collapse, the Maya world shifted. New centers in the north, like Chichen Itza and later Mayapan, rose to prominence for a time, suggesting that many who fled the southern lowland cities sought new beginnings elsewhere. But the old cities, the majestic kingdoms and the tropical forests, were never reoccupied on the same scale. The people had changed their pattern of life, perhaps permanently. The ruins became sacred ancestral sites, not places to rebuild. 1,000 years passed in which the temples of Tikal, Palenque, and others lay wrapped in silence, the jungle covering their grandeur. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that explorers and archaeologists, armed with machetes and curiosity, brought the world's attention back to these lost cities. When we look at the eerily frozen scenes, murals left half-painted, monuments left half-carved, we feel the human drama as if it just happened. We are compelled to ask, could a civilization so brilliant really just collapse? The Maya collapse stands as a sobering lesson. It shows that no society, however advanced, is immune to environmental upheaval or internal discord. It also hints that the line between thriving and collapse is thinner than we might think. One good drought, one war too many, and even a city that has stood for centuries can fall. Today, walking among the moss-covered pyramids and palaces, one can sense both the greatness and the fragility of human achievement. The scene calls to mind those ancient scriptural cautions about impermanence and hubris. Like the ruins of bygone peoples mentioned in holy books, the plazas of the Maya are a reminder and a warning. They remind us that we must live in balance with our environment. For the Maya, an ecological imbalance turned their breadbasket into a dust bowl. They warn us that social and political cohesion is precious. For the Maya, once their unity shattered, their cities could not stand. And perhaps they whisper that all earthly glory is fleeting, for even the mightiest kings and the most splendid temples are eventually claimed by time. In the end, the precise answer to why the Mayans abandoned their cities remains partly elusive, a subject of ongoing research and debate. But in that very mystery lies the story's enduring power. It is a tale of caution, of wonder, and of respect for the forces that govern the rise and fall of civilizations. The abandoned Maya cities, with their towering pyramids now home to birds and vines, speak without words. In their quiet grandeur, they invite us to ponder how a society so strong could unravel, and to reflect on the vulnerabilities of our own. The investigation continues, but the dramatic story is clear. The Maya did not simply disappear, they journeyed through catastrophe and change, leaving behind stone testaments that challenge us to decipher their fate. It is a story as dramatic as any legend, made all the more profound because it really happened, and because its echoes continue to resonate with us today, urging us to learn from the ghosts of the Maya's greatness and collapse.